Good morning, fathers of daughters. This is Ephraim B. Martin, and this is another live stream. Welcome to the beautiful state of Colorado. I welcome all fathers, regardless of your culture or your ethnic group. Welcome to Grow Dad YouTube channel. Fathers, today's live stream, what I would like to discuss is social media violence against our daughters. Let me repeat that. Social media violence against our daughters, fathers. You know, fathers, we're living in a world today where social media is pretty much dictating the flow of what is happening to a lot of our daughters and how a lot of our daughters end up getting caught up and being a part of social media violence. My goal, one of my goals as a Grow Dad, is to provide fathers with information because I consider myself an informational provider, and I want to share information in helping fathers understand our sense of urgency that we need in protecting and keeping our daughters safe and building long-term sustainable relationships with them. My book, Daddy's Girls, which is available at Amazon.com, can be purchased. And I discuss specifically, I believe I have a blueprint on how to build long-term sustainable relationships with our daughters. So fathers of daughters, I have 4 adult daughters and they're all adult women. So I've been through every stage of development with them. And I want to share now. You know, I'm at a totally different stage in my life where I just want to see all fathers have great relationships with their children, specifically great relationships with their daughters, because it's difficult for a lot of men because they don't know how to raise girls and they never learn how to raise girls. So that's where I enter the picture to help fathers. When it comes to media, when it comes to social media and violence of our daughters, we're dealing with a totally different situation today than it was when I was growing up. I'm Gen X, and today's parents of millennials are having to deal with Generation Alpha. And it's just a totally different situation when it comes to the rearing and building of our daughters. I know when my girls were little, social media was just getting started. My youngest daughter is 23. My oldest daughter is 35. And I have a 29 and 26-year-old. So I didn't really have to worry about social media as much when they were little girls because it was just getting started. I know my youngest probably got exposed the fastest, but at that time, it wasn't what it is today. There weren't as many apps on cell phones, tablets, and computers, and pretty much social media didn't run our daughters' lives, which it does today. Generation Alpha girls. This is 2014. The oldest generation girls are now going to be turning 14 years of age this year, fathers. They were born in 2010, and this is 2024. So they're 14, or they will be turning 14. And it's a scary time for a lot of our daughters, you know, with Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and all the other social media outlets and platforms that are available to our daughters through their cell phones. Because the one thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our daughters have cell phones. It's pretty much needed today for protection and safety so we could be aware of where our children are at But we do know with cell phones come responsibility. And as fathers, our number one priority should be keeping our daughters protected and safe. So when it comes to social media violence, it comes in many different forms, fathers of daughters. It comes in the form of bullying. It comes in the form of fathers allowing their daughters to date before the age of 16. It comes in a lot of different forms through social media. So what I'm going to do today is I want to share several videos with fathers of daughters. Once again, all the videos that I share are fair use videos. They're all in my description on my YouTube channel and on the video that I'm live streaming today. And you can get them through YouTube. Okay. So everything that I always share for informational purposes is available on YouTube. It's fair use. So I'm not worried about copyright and copyright strikes because everything, like I said, I'm sharing is for informational purposes, and you can get everything through YouTube. Okay, fathers? So let's take a look at these videos that I've compiled for your view and for your information. And one of the most important things, fathers, is to make sure that we are on the front end of technology, not on the back end, on the front end. We have to know what's going on with our daughters. Middle school is going to be very, very challenging for most of our daughters. Most girls are going to be challenged during middle school. So we just want to make sure that we have as much information, do as much research as we can to help us make informed decisions and great decisions for our daughters. Okay, fathers? So let's take a look at these videos that I've put together. Okay.
We're back with more of our special event, Kids in Crisis Screen Time. And it is time to hear from the kids themselves.
Yeah, how do they feel about their devices and the time they spend on them? NBC's Kate Snow is here with that part of the story. Hi, Kate.
Hi, good morning, guys. By the age of 15, 86% of kids have a smartphone, according to Common Sense Media. And the U.S. Surgeon General says 95% of teens, 13 to 17, are using social media. There are a lot of positives, right? Connecting with friends, for example, but there are also some very real risks. 21-year-old Sophie Chev clearly remembers the moment she joined social media. It was the day of her 10th birthday party.
I was someone that grew up pretty heavily bullied and someone that struggled to fit in socially. So when my peers told me that there was this app that they were downloading to stay connected to each other, to expand their social life, I thought that if I downloaded it, it would help me fit in too.
She downloaded Instagram and followed a few other students. But Sophie says when she turned to the Explore page, she saw content from accounts she didn't follow. And when she started clicking on posts about models and weight loss, she says it took a turn.
It went from swap out a candy bar for a carrot to this is how to hide your food, how to avoid eating completely.
Sophie says the content helped lead to her eating disorder. She was hospitalized 13 times, starting at the age of 15, when her doctor delivered this dire warning.
He looked me in the eyes and said, the insurance called and asked for your prognosis. And I had to tell them that you are going to die in the next couple of weeks. Your heart, liver, kidneys, they're all failing.
Sophie made major changes in her life, and she's in a healthier place now, going to therapy and taking a 2-year break from social media. And her story is not unique. When asked about the impact of social media on their body image, 46% of teens 13 to 17 said that social media makes them feel worse. Back in May, the U.S. Surgeon General issued a warning, calling the youth mental health crisis the defining public health issue of our time.
We see rates of depression and anxiety and suicide and loneliness going up among young people. And I'm concerned that social media is an important driver of that.
The Surgeon General points to 2019 research finding teens who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media face double the risk for mental health issues like depression and anxiety. And a lot of American teens are spending more time than that. A poll this month found just over half of teens say they're spending at least 4 hours a day on social media apps. Favorite app?
I'd probably say like TikTok.
TikTok.
Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram.
Ah, we have a divide. I sat down with 15-year-old Elizabeth Kreitzberg, 13-year-old Josiah McLean Long, 16-year-old Megan Finichel, and 17-year-old Eric Woodbury at their school outside New York City to learn about their own social media use. Josiah, what does it look like when you start looking at TikTok?
When I'm looking at TikTok, like, it's just so many funny videos and I just keep scrolling.
I think like when I'm scrolling, I'm just forgetting and just avoiding everything else in my life.
I watch TikTok like to fall asleep.
These teens say they don't use filters to change their appearance when they post on social media, but they certainly see a lot of that. What about your friends? Do your friends use filters?
I have one friend. She uses a filter on every single photo, every single video. I don't know what she looks like for real anymore. I haven't seen her in a long time.
How much of your mental health do you think is tied to using the phone or screens? Do you see a connection there or not?
Not so much now, but definitely like when I was younger, like 2 years ago, I was more impressionable to like what I'd see. And I was definitely more down on myself then.
What were you seeing?
People like with filters or like people with the unimaginable bodies that are all fake.
Perfect.
All fake and perfect. And it's like, why can't that be me, you know?
Most of their parents follow them on social media.
My mom does send me a lot of TikToks. My dad, like Insta Reels and stuff. Like, it's mostly like funny stuff.
They also tell me they've taken steps to have a healthier relationship with their phones. Megan says last school year, she would sneak her phone into her room at night. This year, her parents make her literally hand it over at 9:30.
My work wasn't getting done. I wasn't getting good sleep because I was scrolling. Because it seems like scrolling at night is the only free time we have. That's what it feels like anyway. But I guess now that they take my phone, I'm getting much better sleep.
As for Sophie, she's now a sophomore at Stanford and a mental health advocate, meeting with President Biden at the White House last year. And while she's back on social media, she says her relationship with it is different.
Social media now is a place of learning, but it is a place where I have to be able to make informed decisions in order to protect myself and to protect that 10-year-old Sophie every single day.
In the years since Sophie's experience, Instagram has made changes. Meta, Instagram and Facebook's parent company, tells us they don't allow anyone to encourage or promote eating disorders, and they remove content when they see it, whenever they become aware of it. NBC News also reached out to a lot of other social media companies about safety measures for teens. Snapchat, for example, has in-app parental tools. It's called the Family Center. It allows you to view your teens' friends and who they've messaged recently. You can restrict sensitive content. You can report any concerns that you have. TikTok told us they set a 1 hour daily screen time limit on teen accounts under 18, but the teens can enter a passcode to override that and continue watching.
A lot of teens will tell you they know the passcode.
Yeah.
But Kate, thank you very much. Let's keep the conversation going with a group of parents who definitely understand these struggles in this battle over smartphones.
And to answer their questions, Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson, a relationship therapist who helps families overcome mental health challenges, including the challenges of screen time. She's also the author of Courageous Conversations Connect. And Larissa May is a digital wellness activist and founder of Half the Story.
So, Larissa, what was your wake-up call? You're young. You're a part of this generation not too long ago. When did you realize this was a real problem? And what's your message to those out here listening today?
My wake-up call is when I almost ended my life. And when I went to the psych center, they asked me about all other forms of wellness, sexual wellness, physical wellness, but not digital wellness. And I was spending between 10 and 12 hours a day. My message and what I built was an organization to solve this problem. And we know that technology isn't going anywhere. So I believe we need to live in a world and give kids the tools to have active and healthy relationships to achieve digital flourishing.
RG, a lot of parents give their kids phones because they say, I want my kid to be safe. I want in case she needs me or he needs me, when really what we've seen throughout this hour is the boogeyman is actually inside the phone, not outside the phone. But if you are going to give your kid a phone, what are some things that you should do to make sure you do it properly?
Yeah, hold on. You got to remember the phone is a powerful tool that you're putting in the hands of your children.
Yeah.
And it's like putting a 2-year-old in the driver's seat and saying, drive.
Yeah.
You're going to crash. So the children's brains aren't fully developed. The parents have to guide them just like anything else. So open conversation, not one or done. Having the conversation, what are you going to do with the phone? How are you going to manage the phone? If you're going to feel uncomfortable with the phone, here are the signs to look for.
Yeah.
What are the danger signs? Those are important. And then also thinking about, all right, now that you have open communication, the protective factors, know the codes, know the accesses, know the social media platforms that those kids are on, and then make sure that you have access.
Yeah.
Your parents are not your friends.
Yeah.
Really, at the end of the day, you're the parent. Your job is to protect them.
Yeah.
And so have that access.
Let's get some of the parents' questions. We've got Wanda Rodriguez. She's got a 12-year-old daughter. Hi, Wanda.
Hi,
What's your
Wanda.
question?
So I seem to find that every time I ask my daughter to put her phone down, it turns into a fight. How can I get her to put her phone away without causing an argument?
This is such a big issue.
Yeah.
I mean, parents say this is like the only thing they're fighting about anymore.
Yeah. So Wanda, and all you other parents, thank you for asking that question. You're not alone. This is a community conversation. This is not the individual conversation. You guys got to talk to each other. What are you doing with each other? And for your daughter or for your sons, then find common ground. There's always going to be some common ground. Means keep that lines of communication open. The common ground might be, okay, we're going to stay on the phone less. We're going to use the phone at certain times. We're going to have tech-free zones.
Would that have worked for you, Larissa, when you were in those shoes?
I definitely needed boundaries.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to have them because my brain was still developing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the boundaries are going to lead to fight. I always think about this as a parent. It's like, boy, parenting is hard.
Yeah.
Letting it slide is so much easier. Sometimes you're just not in the mood to fight, so we give in, but
you can't give in.
We can't
give in.
Let's get to our next question. We have Diana Napier. She's got a teenager at home. She's got a question. Hi.
Hi. Good morning. How do you foster open communication with your children so they feel they can come and talk to you if they see something online that makes them feel jealous or scared?
Well, the reality is that tech is very emotional. There's so much fear. We're often pointing and yelling at our kids for being on their devices, but more often than not, like I did, I escaped through my screen to numb out. The best thing you can do as a parent is to be vulnerable yourself and to sit down and to hold your teenager because they need that more than they need finger pointing. And ask them, hey, social media has been making me feel really bad about my body. How does it feel about you? Lead with curiosity. Ask them not just the bad things, but also what really excites you about being in the digital world. Show me, because I have no idea what For You page is.
Yeah. We want to play a clip. This is from Project Healthy Minds at an event. It's a nonprofit. And just last week, there were two parents at an event. Carson was there, Tony and Brandy Roberts. Their 14-year-old daughter, England, died by suicide. They learned she was depressed after opening up her phone and finding a locked note. Tony had a message he wanted to share. We thought we should share it with you. Take a listen.
One of the things I really want the world to know, please know your children's unlock code. We knew her unlock code, we knew her passwords, we knew everything, but I just didn't know how to navigate through these platforms.
I mean, that's it. You can set all these rules. And if you don't understand how to use it, Larissa, I mean, it's like, we keep saying it, it's not a fair fight. What do you do?
Well, for parents, you have to make space. And I think we talk a lot about boundaries, but we also have to make this fun and bring play and creativity into this. So a lot of times we say, have a screen-free scavenger hunt, or do deepfake bingo, or you're bringing your family together to try to identify what's true and what's not. We also have to remember that parents are the models, just like any other substance. We look at our kids, how do we save them? But you have to save yourself first.
And you said, RG, at nighttime, lock the phone up. I mean, Al Roker did that with his son. He took his kid's phone, he put it in a lockbox in a safe and said, see you in the morning. And it may cause a huge to-do, but afterwards, they've slept that night, they've woken up in the morning, and they can start again.
It's like tech-free zones. Create tech-free zones. Create opportunity for talking. I like to say green time over screen time. Go out and talk. In the car, don't miss the opportunity to get off the screen and be the model for your children, because you're creating a different culture.
It's a wake-up call for all of us.
Grown-ups.
Believe me, my kids are the first ones to say, hey, Mom, you're on the screen. So guess what? We can all do better. RG and Larissa, thank you so much to all of our parents. Thank you. And you can find more answers on today.com, including the resources that Larissa talked about her nonprofit has to offer.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't miss the Today Show every weekday.
Okay, fathers. So that was a very, very informative video, fathers. And, once again, I'm an informational provider. So I want to share all this relevant information for fathers today of the Gen Alpha girls. Pretty soon, Gen Bravo children will start to be born in 2025, right? So that's going to be a whole different generation. But fathers, I just think that we need to make sure that we are on the front end of technology. As you can see through the video, the concerns of parents are legitimate. And, it's very interesting. I remember when I was a dean of students for middle school and high school, and I know some of the biggest blowups with children and their parents was always regarding their phones, and, kids, there's a certain attachment that all children have with their cell phones. They feel as though it's their, it's their personal property. They take it very, very serious. And for most of our kids, it's their lifeline, right? So that's how they communicate. That's how they move. That's how they live. And it's just a different environment today. Like I said, my daughters didn't have to necessarily go through that, and they're adult women. So we just have to always be mindful. A lot of our children are going to feel like their space is being invaded a lot of times, and they don't have any privacy. But the one thing we have to explain to our children is to let them know part of the protection and safety piece of it as fathers is being aware of where they're at. That is so critical, is knowing where our daughters are and who they're hanging out with. We got to get to know their friends. We got to know who their peer group is, okay? Because most decisions that are being made by the peer group and not necessarily the individuals within the peer group. It's usually a joint decision. We got to understand who their friends are, the changing of friends. That's important. If our daughters are struggling, we have to communicate with our daughters on a daily basis, fathers. That is the one way that we're definitely going to know. We got to watch their moods, their mood swings, because they're going to have them when they're going through puberty. This is the stage. When they get to middle school, they're going through puberty. Their bodies are changing. So there's a lot of challenges, dads. And, we just need to make sure that we're on top of it, because it is, for a lot of our daughters, it is a life-changing event for them, right? And it just catches most fathers off guard. We're just not prepared. So what I'm trying to do as a girl dad myself is help fathers understand the sense of urgency. And we have time to get there, right? But we have to build those relationships with our daughters, and we have to make sure we sustain them, okay? So that was one video. I've got 3 more that I want to share with you. And they're very informative as well. So here's the next video. Give me a second here. Let me get it together. Give me a second. Okay, give me a second, fathers. I'm trying to figure out this whole technology thing. It's challenging. Let's see. Okay. Almost there, dads. Almost there. The brother's working hard. Okay, let me see. Is this the one that I want? Yes. Okay. Okay, dads. So this next video, we're talking about social media and violence, and it's from the Media Law Center. I have that in the description as well. And Media Law Center has a lot of good videos that they make, and for families. And they're very, very informative. Okay, Father. So, like I said, feel free to look in the description of this live stream and the replay of this live stream, and all the videos that I'm sharing today are there. But Social Media Victims Law Center, very, very good. They have a lot of informative videos that could help parents. Okay, so let's get it rocking.
Sexual violence is an all-encompassing term that refers to any type of forced or coerced sexual activity, including assault, abuse, online sexual harassment, and sex trafficking. It transcends culture, nation, race, and gender. It can devastate families and break communities apart. Unfortunately, the rise of social media has made it even easier for sexual violence to happen, and can even connect sexual predators with potential prey. This is referred to as technology-facilitated sexual violence, or TFSV, where digital technologies are used to enable both virtual and face-to-face sexually based harms. La Trobe University classifies 4 main types of technology-facilitated sexual violence: online sexual harassment, gender and sexuality-based harassment, cyberstalking, and image-based sexual exploitation. According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, sexual violence occurs anytime one person is manipulated or forced into sexual activity without their consent. In some cases, like those involving a child, or when there is some type of power imbalance between the people involved, the victim can't consent due to their position. Lack of consent is the underlying factor in all forms of sexual violence, and it becomes easy to see how social media plays an increasing role in various categories of sexual violence. Sexual harassment, as defined by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, is a form of harassment characterized by unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical harassment of a sexual nature. While sexual harassment can occur at school, after-school activities, sports programs, or other places where young people aren't directly supervised, it has become all too common in online spaces, such as sending inappropriate and unwanted images, especially to minors, requesting inappropriate images, especially from minors, sending inappropriate emails, text, or social media messages, posting lewd or sexually indecent photos of the victim, use of obscene or vulgar language, discussions of sexual activity on social media, and commenting on another person's body or on their sexual matters in an online forum. Cyberstalking occurs when a perpetrator repeatedly makes unwanted online contact with a victim. It may involve persistent messaging, sending inappropriate or threatening images, and the creation of fake accounts to get around being blocked. Cyberstalking can rob victims of their sense of safety and inflict lasting emotional damage. It also has the frightening potential to escalate to in-person conduct. Sexual abuse, according to the American Psychological Association, is when a perpetrator takes advantage of the victim's inability to give consent to force unwanted sexual activity. Online interactions can lead to in-person situations where this dangerous type of sexual abuse can take place. Many sexual abuse victims know their perpetrators and often have been subject to grooming behavior either in person or through a social media platform. This relationship between victim and abuser often includes emotional manipulation, making the victim believe that they did consent, that they wanted it, or that they would hurt the abuser's feelings or make them angry if they refused. Immediate reactions to sexual abuse can be physical pain, shock, fear, and shame. Long-term damaging psychological and emotional effects include depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, difficulty forming intimate relationships, substance use disorders, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, or attempts. The National Sexual Violence Resource Center defines sexual assault as any type of unwanted sexual conduct, such as unwanted kissing of a sexual or non-sexual body part, unwanted touching of a sexual body part, attempted penetration or rape, sodomy, or penetration, forcing another person to watch one masturbate. This is a physical form of sexual violence and can happen either between people who know each other or by a perpetrator who is a stranger to the victim. Sometimes sexual assault is an escalation of sexual harassment that begins online. Sexual assault can happen to anyone, man or woman. Without a victim's consent, all sexual acts are considered sexual assault. Regardless of what the victim was wearing, their gender, or even whether they were drinking or using drugs, sexual contact without consent is assault. That includes the following circumstances: online sexual harassment, child sexual assault and abuse, rape, or forced penetration, unwanted sexual touching or contact, sexual harassment or unwanted sexual comments, sexual exploitation, flashing or displaying genitals without consent, revenge porn, or sharing intimate images without permission, watching an intimate act without permission. If you were a victim of harassment online, report the incident to the relevant platform or moderator and document everything that happened, including preserving any messages. Anyone can be a victim of sexual violence, and it's important to understand the forms sexual violence can take, what to do after you've been harmed, and your options for justice. Above all, a victim of sexual violence is still a victim, no matter who they are or the circumstances. If you or someone you love has been a victim of online sexual violence, you have hope and legal recourse. An attorney specializing in pursuing claims against online platforms and social media companies can help. The Social Media Victims Law Center works to hold social media companies legally accountable for the harm they inflict on vulnerable users. For more information and resources to help with online sexual violence, reach out to our team today for a free confidential case evaluation.
Okay, fathers. So that was another informative video. explaining sexual assault and what that looks like, and how many of our daughters could potentially be facing this, as well as little boys. So it's just not our little girls, just little boys as well. I focus on daughters. I focus on little girls because I'm a girl dad, but it happens to little boys as well. So fathers, as you can see, our plates are going to be full, right? When you combined social media, and our daughters are going through puberty, and just the experiences that they're having with their bodies changing and developing, a lot of our daughters are going to struggle with the transition. Puberty can take anywhere between 4 to 5 years, if not longer, for some of our daughters. Some little girls start developing as early as 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. So it's frightening. It really, really is frightening. And we just need to make sure as fathers that we are paying attention and being consistent in our daughters' lives. Validation is important. Open communication is going to be the key to building and sustaining the relationships with our baby girls. They are fathers. I can tell you, I had to spend a lot of time with my girls when they were little, one-on-one time with my daughters when they were little girls. I was active in everything that they did from elementary school to middle school. I was always at their school, meeting with their teachers, making sure that if there's anything I needed to be doing different or interventions, I was handling that, right? And more fathers, we got to take that active role. It may not be comfortable for a lot of fathers, but we have to do it. We don't get to pass the buck to the mothers and put this on the mothers only, because that's not fair to the mothers of our daughters, to the wives, right? So we have to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to balance. Our daughters are going to need their mothers and they're going to need their fathers. They need both parents to be successful. A single parent household is not ideal. It just is not. Both parents are necessary, whether you are married or divorced. Both parents are necessary for the success of our children. Okay? So that was the second video. I have another video here that I would like to share. Give me a second here. Allow me to get it set up. So this next video is titled "Why Instagram and Social Media is Toxic for Girls." This is with Jordan Peterson and Dr. Jean Twenge, Twenge, Twenge. I probably trashed her name. I didn't mean to, but this is another informative video. And like I said, fathers, the more information that we have, the better off we're going to be. Period. The more research and studies that we do on our own, the better off we're going to be to make informed decisions. And that's on us. So many parents, fathers, we have all this technology in front of us. We have to use it. YouTube is free, right? Most social media platforms are free, but YouTube is free. You can find anything on YouTube, from tutorials to education to whatever. Anything you're looking for in a video, it's on YouTube. It's free, right? So I encourage you to use YouTube, right? With all the available resources that are here for you today, fathers, okay? All right, let me see. There we go. Okay.
Indicating these increases in mental health symptoms among young people. Well, the other thing I'm wondering about too, I've thought about this to a great degree, is that I studied antisocial behavior in boys and girls. And boys, they're pretty much straightforward juvenile delinquents when they're antisocial. They kick and fight and steal and break rules. And it's a lot of externalizing behavior, right? A lot of acting out. But girls who are antisocial, they use reputation destruction and innuendo and gossip and backbiting, and they can be unbelievably good at it. And everyone knows that. I mean, Mean Girls, that famous movie, was about precisely that. And the thing about social media, that's one of the things about it that's quite interesting and disturbing, is that female type antisocial behavior scales brilliantly online, because it can be done behind the scenes, it can be done anonymously, it can be done with that derisive contempt, let's say, and the consequences are vanishingly small. And so I can imagine that teenage girls who are often subject to bullying by other girls are now subject to bullying in a way that's much more subtle and much more devious and much more continuous, because that's the other thing that happens to young people now is, can you imagine being a teenager where nothing you ever did would be forgotten?
Right. Right. And it's 24/7. It's always with you, because that's the way they communicate with their friends. That is their lifeline to the world. And so it used to be, maybe you got bullied at school, you could come home and get away from it. And now there's no escape. And it is particularly toxic for girls. I mean, think about Instagram. Instagram at base is a platform where primarily girls and young women post pictures of themselves and ask other people to comment.
Jesus, brutal.
Right? It absolutely is brutal.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
popularity becomes a number, likes and followers, and cyberbullying, all the things that we're talking about. Just, it is a toxic soup.
Well, I remember, we did psychometric analysis and looked at the psychometric analysis of thought patterns that loaded on trait neuroticism. And so, as you know well, but I'll explain to everyone else, trait neuroticism is something like your baseline level of the proclivity to experience negative emotion, like depression and anxiety. And one of the things that's quite striking is that self-conscious thoughts load so heavily on neuroticism, they're almost indistinguishable from emotions. And so it looks like if you're self-conscious, if you're thinking about yourself, you are instantly miserable. And then if you're a teenage, then it gets worse for teenage girls, I think, because we also know that teenage girls experience a spike in neuroticism that's attendant on puberty, and that their self-conscious concerns tend to be particularly body focused. And that's probably a consequence of the fact that females are evaluated more stringently as a consequence of their appearance, particularly when they're young. I mean, men are evaluated on the basis of their performance, let's say, but women tend to be evaluated more on the basis of their appearance. And so you can see that's a perfect storm for young girls, because they hit a negative emotion peak at 13. Now they're susceptible to bullying. They're extremely self-conscious about their bodies. And then the entire online world is a place to display for public. It's like the old nightmare that people have about public speaking, is being naked on a stage. That's really, in some real sense, what the social media world has done to teenage girls. It's got to be damn near unbearable.
Yeah, and the consequences have been severe. So teen depression has doubled, and that was true even before the pandemic. The rise started about 2011 or 2012, right as social media moved from optional to mandatory, and right when smartphones were owned by the majority of people. Loneliness went up, anxiety went up, and it's not just symptoms. Self-harm behaviors. So the CDC keeps track of this, emergency room visits for self-harm. So that's an objectively measured behavior, not something subject to any kind of self-report bias. And self-harm among 10 to 14-year-old girls has quadrupled in the last 12 years.
Yeah. Well, that's a logical extension of feelings of inadequacy and depression and anxiety. No, a non-specific marker.
My question is this idea of like the boss chick and you know, independent Black woman. And
So
has that
Has it
helped-
served us? Is that the
Yeah,
question? Has that served us?
helpful, or is it destroying the Black family ecosystem?
I think you have to say on some level
Okay, let me cut this. Sorry about that. That went on to something it wasn't supposed to go on to. Let me, Kawal Jimmy, thank you for your service. God bless you. Appreciate it, man. I'm just doing what I do, brother. I'm just doing what I do. And, you know, I'm just, I'm a concerned father. So I will continue to grind, and I will make sure that all fathers are informed with the information that I'm providing. You know, I'm a one-stop shop. I do all the research. I worked in the criminal justice system for 20 years. I worked in K-12 education for 10 years. So I have 30 years of experience of working with kids and families from all socioeconomic backgrounds. Plus I raised 4 daughters. So I know what I'm talking about here. And like I said, I'm very passionate and interested in making sure that fathers understand the sense of urgency that we have to have for our daughters. Okay, so I have one more video that I'd like to share with you. It's about 15 minutes long. This next video is going to break down statistics on smartphone addiction in Gen Alpha. It's by Jonathan Haidt, social psychologist. Okay, this is another very informative video for us fathers. So give me a second here. Let me get this set up. Let's see. I love this technology. As I do my live streams, I am learning more and more how to navigate it, and not necessarily how to perfect it, but how to get around it from learning. I've watched hundreds of videos on YouTube in learning how to navigate social media when it comes to YouTube, how to live stream, and it's I've learned a lot, and I feel blessed because it's a learning experience, you know, and I'm just a brother that learns, you know, and I'm a brother that shares, and this is what I do. So I'm learning it. I'm enjoying learning it, and I'm getting better at it. Okay, fathers, smartphone addiction in Gen Alpha. Jonathan Haidt, social psychologist. It's about 15 minutes long.
Well, thanks for joining us from New York. Now, Jonathan, Miriam's spoken there about family breakdown and mental health. You've been doing a lot of work on the relationship between social media and mental health. You've got a new book coming on this theme next year. 2 questions. How strong is the link so far? And also, can you say a bit more about the demographics? Is what you're seeing universally applied amongst all young people, or are there some groups for whom the effect is more pernicious than others?
Yes. Well, thank you. What a pleasure to be here. In the last week, I've gotten share or visiting requests from so many people that I want to meet. I'm so sorry that I'm not there with you, but I had to actually hide away to finish this book. So here we are. On your question, so let me just give you the big picture here. Something happened around 2012. it began to show up with weirdness on campus in 2014. That led me and Greg Lukian up to write the Coddling the American Mind article. We tried to figure out what caused this weird new morality, these terrible ideas. We thought maybe social media has something to do with it, but we didn't know in 2015. Then we wrote our book published in 2018, and now we had a little more evidence, but still it wasn't crystal clear in the scientific literature. And even today, it's not crystal clear when we look at the published research. But when we look all around us, you talk to the teachers, you talk to the psychologists, you talk to the parents, you talk to members of Gen Z, nobody defends this phone-based childhood. Everybody sees the problems. And what I have found, and Jean Twenge is a research partner here with me, is that if you plot out the trend lines for depression and anxiety, self-harm and suicide, they're relatively flat until around 2010. And then all over the English-speaking world, they start shooting up around 2012, plus or minus a year. In fact, just 10 minutes ago, my research assistant and I put up a post showing that rates of suicide are at peak levels across the Anglosphere, but only for girls. So I think this is a real discovery. You'll see the post on my Substack. So anyway, I'm sorry to give you a shorter answer. What we're seeing is a very sharp, sudden change in girls' mental health all around the Anglosphere and the Nordic countries. It's the same thing. And this will relate back to the previous talk. It's in those countries where there was a lot of independence and young people were not deeply rooted in communities, in religious communities, and in families. There's a lot of individualism. In those countries, when everything changed around 2012, all the kids got smartphones, or the girls all went on Instagram. It's right around then that in the Anglo and Nordic countries, the girls especially get washed away. And you cannot grow up in networks. You have to grow up in communities. I'll just add two other variables to this when you asked about individual differences. We have plots on some graphs I would show, or you can find them in my Substack posts, showing that it's especially, it's not just girls, it's girls on the left, and it's secular conservatives. So if you're a religious, if you're a kid who's a religious conservative, on average, your mental health is not really much worse than it was 10 years ago. But if you're a secular liberal girl, you probably, literally, like more than half say, I have been told that I have a mental health problem. So those are the main demographics about what's happening. We're here to talk about the fragmentation of society and the future of what I think is the best way to live together, which is the Anglo-styled liberal democracy. But if the next generation has such severe levels of anxiety and fragility and has so little experience collaborating with people who think differently than them, for all the talk about diversity, many of them can't handle working with someone who voted the other way. Yeah, I guess I'm here to bring more of this litany of bad news about current indicators, and I hope in our discussion we'll be talking about how to turn that around.
Right. So can you say a bit more about that? So you're saying amongst the young people who go to church, synagogue, or mosque, that they're less susceptible to the mental health side effects of social media than those who don't have religion in their lives?
That's right. So there's several reasons for this. So if we just focus on social media, it's liberals use it more than conservatives, and liberal girls use it the most. So Jean Twenge says it might just be that the liberal girls spend so many hours a day on social media, and it's incredibly bad for your mental health, whereas conservative religious kids don't. But I think it's a lot more than that. And what I've learned while writing the book, I began by focusing on social media, but I now see that it's not just social media. It's what I've been calling the phone-based childhood. So for all of human history, for millions of years, all mammals play. Mammal childhood is about building up your brain, and you do that through play. Anyone who's had a puppy knows it's all about play. So we had play-based childhoods up until around 2010. I've seen data in Britain, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like 60% of British kids in 2009, 2010, 60% of them used to go over to a friend's house sometimes each week. And then by 2015, that had dropped to something like 20%. I may be wrong on the numbers, but the thing is, kids used to actually see each other in person. And once they all got phones and loaded with social media for the girls, it's video games for the boys, Childhood stops being play-based, which is what a mammal brain needs to wire up properly. It stops being play-based, it becomes phone-based, where phone includes video game consoles, all the stuff that makes your social interactions virtual, often asynchronous, disembodied, transitory. So it's a complete, what I'm calling it, the great rewiring of childhood. It happened between 2010 and 2015. It hit the US, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, exactly the same way. New Zealand's a little bit later, but the US, UK, Canada are exactly in lockstep about what happened to our kids' mental health.
Now, does the research say anything about which platforms are better than others? I mean, for example, I can't imagine, I've got two teenage boys, 13 and 15. I've got a girl who's 10 years old, just young enough for me to bridge a research and stop her from what lies ahead. But do you find, for example, that Instagram is more pernicious than, I don't know, Twitter? I guess kids don't really use LinkedIn, but you know, you've got to be careful to lump all social media together.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So a really helpful distinction can be made between what we used to call these things, which were social networking systems. Networks are useful to adults. There's no doubt about that. LinkedIn is very useful. People use it to advance their purposes. So all of these things, including Facebook, used to be called social networking systems. You can do a Google Trends search on that, and you'll see that term rose very high. And then that term begins to drop in the 2010s. We don't call them that anymore. After 2009, they became much more viral about the like button, the retweet button. It's not about connecting people. It's now about performing on a platform. And so we now call them social media platforms. Now, platforms can be useful to adults too, if you want to yell and scream and shout and promote your brand. So these things are not very good for adults, but we let adults make their choices. What about kids? Should children grow up playing with each other and sometimes getting into arguments and fights between the two of them and then working it out? Or is it better if they all stand on a platform where they can say things in public, including to strangers, and then they can be publicly shamed by potentially millions of people? Some of those kids then commit suicide. The case of Molly Russell in the UK is the famous one, but we have many, many in the US as well. To give a more concise answer, social networks are useful for adults. I don't believe social networks are useful at all for children. Children should not be on social networks. They should be playing in person. Social media platforms should never be accessed by children until they're 18. It's just insane that we let kids do these things that can ruin their lives. Instagram is the worst for teen mental health for girls because of the social comparison. And also there's all kinds of new forms of bullying that take place on Instagram. TikTok is probably the worst for their intellectual development. I think it literally reduces their ability to focus on anything while stuffing them with little bits of stuff that was selected by an algorithm for emotional arousal, not for truth, for emotional arousal. I don't know if you talked about this yet at the conference, but the fact that almost half of American Gen Z says, if given the choice between do you support Israel, or do you side more with Israel or Hamas, which way do you go? Well, the great majority of Americans side with Israel, except for Gen Z, which is split 50-50. And there was a Twitter thread recently showing how if you look at what people are seeing on TikTok, you can understand why. TikTok is probably TikTok and Twitter are incredibly dangerous for our democracy. I'd say they're incompatible with the kind of liberal democracy that we developed over the last few hundred years. But Instagram is the worst for girls' mental health.
But if, say, somebody listening to you here thinks, okay, this is my big takeaway from ARC, I'm going to go home and tell my kids to stop using social media, we can imagine the response. They'll say, look, Dad, Mum, you are basically severing me from my social network. You don't understand how it is. Social network is digitized now. Yep. So you're basically a generation behind. It's like Gran saying that you're watching television too much. You're telling me I use social enough. If you do this, that's it. My social life goes.
Thank you. That's a perfect statement of what we call a collective action problem. In the social sciences, especially economics, there's a lot of research on collective action problems. It's just what you described. Any one person doing the right thing is in big trouble. Nobody wants to have their kid be isolated. Why do we ever let our kids on social media? It's only because of the dynamic you just said. And what that means is that we have to look to the literature on how you solve collective action problems. And the main ways are if you can set norms and if you can have laws and policies. So I'd like to set a norm right here. So I'm suggesting 4 norms in my book. And these are all ways to solve collective action problems. And we can all do them, even though the US Congress may never do anything to help us. Although, of course, the UK Parliament is doing great work. Here they are. Norm number one, no smartphones before high school, which in the US is grade 9, around age 14. Just don't give your kids a smartphone, but they'll be cut off. No, you give them a flip phone. The millennials had flip phones. They texted each other, see you at 4 at the mall, and then they would meet at the mall. So just don't give a smartphone to your 10-year-old. Wait till 14, or high school. We have to think about, especially saving elementary school and what we call middle school. If we can get the phones out of there, the collective action problem is solved, and those kids will not have phone-based childhoods. Rule number 2, no social media before 16. So if your kid is the only one who's not on Instagram at 12, it's very hard on her. But what if half the kids are not on Instagram? Now, do you feel as a parent you could say, well, you know what? Half the kids in your grade are on Instagram, half are not? No, you're not getting this till you're 16. Kids are terrified of being the only one, cut off, left out. But if half the kids are not on social media and they actually meet up after school and they do fun things, they'll become the cool kids. Third rule, phone-free schools. Get phones out of schools. And I've got to say, once again, the UK, and England, your health minister, or education minister, I'm sorry, declared that all schools in England should go phone-free. I just want to put in the plug that that does not mean you can keep it in your backpack. That's better than nothing, but really to make it phone-free, because the kids are so addicted, it needs to be, you put them in a locked a phone locker or in a Yonder pouch. Otherwise, the kids are going to go to the bathroom, they'll find ways to get their fix. That's rule 3, phone-free schools. And rule 4 is far more free play and for unsupervised play and childhood independence. Both of our countries freaked out in the 90s, locked up our kids because of, we lost trust in each other. We thought everyone's a child molester or rapist. There's a great book, Paranoid Parenting, by Frank Furedi, British sociologist. So that's it. If we do those 4 things, and even if half of us do them, we solve the collective action problems.
Well, now, in your much of your work, especially in The Righteous Mind, you've emphasized how important it is to pay attention to those who disagree with you on the other end of the spectrum. Now, there are people here who say what you're talking about is largely imagined. Can you talk a bit about the robustness? How sure are you of this? I mean, we know, for example, that mental health has been destigmatized in the last 10, 15 years. That's by and large a very good thing. So people are way more likely to report mental health problems now. The phrase, it's okay not to be okay, is now fairly standard amongst young people. So might it be that what you're observing is just simply the end of the stigma, and the people being a bit more open-minded, a bit more recognizing that people can come in and out of good or bad mental health, rather than a tech-induced breakdown of childhood?
Certainly. So that seemed like a plausible hypothesis to me while I was writing The Righteous Mind with Greg Lukianoff. But once we found all the data on self-harm and suicide, now that explanation no longer works. So, what you're suggesting, and this is what many people said all the way up, some people still say it today, very few though. But before COVID, a few medical people were saying, no, it's, just what you said. It's just that they're self-diagnosing at higher rates, but it's not an underlying change in mental health. Well, why is it then? Right around 2013, in the US, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, all these girls suddenly start checking in to psychiatric inpatient units. They're making many more suicide attempts. The level of self-harm goes up by 200 or 300% increases, especially for the younger girls, age 10 to 14. So no, that idea that it's just a change in self-report doesn't hold any water, because we see very much the same curves at the same time for behavior, and suicide certainly is not a self-report variable. So no, this is real. This is the biggest, it's certainly the biggest mental health crisis in all of known history for kids. And I need to collect the data on, how many kids died from COVID, how many kids died even from polio. The increased number of suicides since 2010 is so large that I suspect this is among the largest public health threats to children since the major diseases were wiped out.
Well, I could talk about this all day, but sadly we have to wrap it up now. I mean, Jonathan, it's great to see you working away in your book. When can we expect it? Life After Babel it's called, isn't it?
Yes, March 26th is when it comes out in the US. I believe it'll come out in the UK at the same time. And I'm just making arrangements now for a visit to the UK. I'll probably be in London on April 29th of that week, whatever that week is of April 29th.
Well, we can all save the
I hope
date.
there'll be some events in London. I hope to see some of you then and there.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please, everybody, join me in thanking Jonathan House. Good.
I remember when the iPhone first came out, one of my friends got it first, and the way he explained it to me was, you'll never.
Okay, fathers. There we go. What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? Girl dads. That's 4 awesome videos. They can help you. Right? So that was very interesting from the perspective for me, you know, when he explained the differences between social media platforms and social media networks. That makes perfect sense as far as adults go. And I guess the challenge for millennial parents is with your Gen Alpha children, how do you implement keeping them away from social media? And, you know, what do you do if your child is the only one? Because chances are your child is going to be the only one. Most parents are going to feel the pressure and cave in and give their kids a cell phone and give their kids a smartphone. Like the gentleman said, you know, you can give your kids a flip phone. It's not a smartphone. It doesn't have all the apps and everything on it. It's just to make phone calls and to get you to and from. So that's the challenge, fathers of daughters, you know, making sure you and the mother are on the same page. That's going to be the challenge, is making sure that you guys are both on the same page, making those decisions collectively. And if you're divorced, the unfortunate thing about that, if you're a divorced father, if you're not on the same page with the mother or your ex, it's going to be a challenge. It's definitely going to be a challenge. Okay, fathers, thank you for attending and being present today. I appreciate you all. And as I continue to build capacity for Girl Dad YouTube channel, I'm excited. This is 2024, and I'm going to continue to grind. Okay, fathers, I will holler at you next week. Have a good week. Stay blessed. Continue to be the best dad that you can be with your children and your daughters. I'm out. Peace.